Oh, look at that smile. Look at you. I'm going to have to like shrink you down a little bit because you're like 2 inches taller than me. Or I can. Oh, well, my chair. There, here we go. Oh, by the way, it's Open Door Podcasts.
In reality, you're taller than me. I don't know. How tall are you?
About 6'2".
Oh, yeah. See, I'm like 5'11", so maybe 5'10" now.
Well, yeah, I'm probably 6'1" now, so we're all shrinking.
Yeah. We're all shrinking, getting older, and gravity's taking its toll.
Yeah.
So, anyways, how's things at your house? Is lacrosse moving along?
Yeah. This is the second official week of lacrosse. This weekend on Saturday is they call it Lax Jam, but it's lacrosse clubs from across the state of Oregon come together and they play 3 or 4 games apiece against the other teams, just kind of a round robin. They don't keep score. Nice. It's just kind of a warm up to and it's kind of a relief for me because that means that all the work that's gone into ordering uniforms, scheduling practices, booking fields, making sure the teams are balanced and the coaches are not obnoxious. It means that most of those things are in place. And I can kind of go, ooh, the fact that it coincides with Easter is just a bonus.
Busy week. Well, we're doing fine. Kathy had her update with her surgery on Tuesday, I think it was, Monday or Tuesday. And next Thursday, she gets her stitches out, and then she can start walking a little bit. But it's still going to be a while. But she's starting to work again from home. So things are going okay around here.
Is she enjoying the scooter to a certain extent?
Yeah, she is. She enjoys. She likes working at home. I'm sure there's distractions in the dogs, but she also loves hanging out with the dogs too. So yeah, I mean, there's pluses and minuses from working at home.
Yeah, as reflecting on what I said last week, I can just hear kind of this evil cackle as she runs around the house, like taking people out.
No, we stay out of her way.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And she's been staying downstairs the whole time. So, I got the upstairs bedroom all to myself, which is kind of weird. But anyways, we're doing all right. So I should probably give you guys a kind of a summary of the sermon. It was kind of it was a deep sermon. And even, as I was thinking about before the podcast here, how to summarize it, I'm like, ooh, that's kind of a hard summary. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, ideally you should be able to say it in a sentence. And I can say it in a sentence. But at the same time, there's so many little points that are frankly quite significant that leads us to that point. And these are deep matters. And it's stuff that, I'm trusting that my congregation is smart enough and to be able to, I believe they're smart enough to be able to kind of follow this, even though this is not average stuff. So, but I basically, I started with just that, we are kind of recapping a little bit last week of we're saved by grace alone, which means there's 2 pieces to that. One is that we really are, we are in desperate need. We truly are helpless to fix ourselves. And the analogy I used, coming off of what you said last week, which is we're not just drowning, we're trying to drown. We're actively going the other direction. But but the flip side of that, which is which on a spiritual level is deeply disempowering, as it's supposed to be. We should empower each other on a interpersonal level, absolutely. But on a spiritual level, we need to come to the point of like, I can't fix me. The flip side of that is that means we're saved utterly by his actions alone. And which is good news, because if I can't fix myself, but I get to be fully fixed by him, fully saved by him. And then I said, the problem with that is the word alone. By grace alone, through faith alone. And the alone piece is the problem. And then I started talking about that piece. Any comments so far? Because I just want to take this a little bit at a time.
Oh,
or do you want me to keep going?
One quick comment, and that is you're thinking about, how do you summarize something that is this complex? That, and this is a poor analogy, but when you look at a complex connect the dots in a kid's book, right? You can say it's going to be a bear standing in front of a cabin in a mountain, but until you connect all those dots, you don't really have the appropriate perspective to appreciate what the end result is. So you can tell us the end result. We also have to be present to follow you as you are connecting those pieces. And if I may say so, I think that's one of the things that we struggle with, is we tend to jump to the end, the end truth, without understanding the journey that it requires to get there. Even as you're talking about grace, like, you're saved, but let's appreciate all the things that go into that, all the ingredients that produce that final salvation. Because if you don't understand that, then you really don't appreciate how you got there and why you're there.
This exactly what just happened with you, Joe, is exactly why I so value our conversations and why I wanted to have podcasts with you, because you help take what I'm doing and you re-say it and you add just the right amount. That's exactly the case. You're right. I can tell you the end, and I might as well I'll tell you in a moment here. But if you don't understand all the little steps that get to that spot, you don't really get why that's a big deal. So the end goal of it is you need to think of our lives with God post coming to faith in terms of creation, that God's creating you, and you need to trust much more in his love and mercy than even your own response to the gospel. That's the end of the whole thing. But in between is these little steps of really getting that you are helpless, but at the same time you are utterly saved by grace, which is not by your works in any way, shape, or form. That's a huge first step. But then the second piece of this is, okay, but if it really is alone, there's a lot of issues that come up to that. And I said, if a person's understanding of what saved by grace means doesn't bring up some of these questions, I would encourage them to rethink it, because even Paul had to address these kinds of issues. The questions are things like, well, aren't we supposed to do something once we come to faith? Aren't we supposed to progress? What do we do with all the commands in Scripture in the New Testament alone? What do you? Because we have to do something with that. I mean, the clear language is we are saved apart from our actions, but we're told to do something. So how do you put these two pieces together? And Paul in Romans, for example, in chapters 3, 4, and 5, pushes that point that I've made up to this point so far that he has to address the issue of, and it's not just, don't we have to get better, less sinful? He says he pushes the most difficult question is, well, why can't we just simply sin? Why can't I just continue to get drunk and sleep around and deal? I mean, because he said it's a legitimate question, and there's that's the next piece of it, is just appreciating the dilemma that grace alone, by faith alone, presents. It's big, and it's big on a lot of things. It's, what do we do with the commands? What do we do if if we don't progress as sinners, as believers? That's soul crushing to people. when they look at their lives and like, I want to be more godly, but I'm just not. What's the problem? There must be something wrong with me. If I'm supposed to move forward, but there can't be anything wrong with God, so there must be something wrong with me. And that just crushes the soul. And so that's a part of it. I mean, and the other piece that's a problem with this. Well, let me pause there, and before I say the last piece, any comments with that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It reminds me, of that term backsliding, which we hear occasionally, but we used to hear a lot more. In this case, I think about it as an unintentional falling away. I don't think about it as, deconstruction, which is intentional, right?
Right, that's intentional.
And I think
right word for biblically speaking, but go ahead.
We really kind of have to check in occasionally, even if your intention is, well, you have to keep your intention focused on the improvement of yourself, recognizing that, and you said it on Sunday, that you're doing it because you want to, not because you're earning something, but because you love me, you've saved me, and I want to do better, not just for myself, for other people, right? You're moving forward intentionally. If you stop that momentum, ultimately you start to slip. The idea that, like, why don't I just keep on sinning? You might not even intend to do it, but because you're not continuing with some kind of forward momentum, you slip. But then here's the dumb analogy. It's like looking at yourself in the mirror every day and saying, I look pretty good, and never stepping on the scale to go, oh, I've gained 20 pounds. That there's something about you being aware of your failures so continually so that you can continue to adjust. I hope that makes sense within the context of what you're sharing.
It does, but here's the piece that I tried to make. It's very, very, very common. In fact, I would say it's natural and almost universal that we think in terms of our spiritual growth after coming to Christ. Sanctification is the fancy word, in terms of a ladder, in terms of moving up closer to perfection, to being like Jesus. Yeah, and we're moving towards that. And I'm suggesting that we actually need to not completely, but nearly, we need to let that go and not think that way, because there's some problems with that.
Well, it asks for comparison. Either comparing with Jesus, comparing to yourself, right, and it kind of reinforces works or performance.
That's the issue, is it reinforces works, and it encourages you to trust that. Oh, I must be getting better, so therefore I'm saved. But wait a minute, then now you're trusting really in works, your actions, rather than God's actions, and that's a deadly problem, because that's not saved by grace, that's saved by works. And that's the problem with that whole framework, is if you see, a lot of times we think about grace as it's something that forgives us for what we've done up to this point, and then it kind of empowers us just to climb up the ladder, and then at whatever point we die, however we are up that ladder, it just brings us the rest of the way to the top. But if that analogy is the correct, then really, why should you climb? Why not just hold on and stay exactly where you are? Or even, for that matter, if he's just going to bring you to the top at the end, is it that big of a deal to go down the ladder a little bit if he's just going to bring you up? See, it brings all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
And there's this push of cheap grace, which is the same. I don't think that's what Bonhoeffer was getting at, because if grace can't fully buy what you need, you have to do something else, then really grace is not worth enough. There's not enough power in it alone to actually fix you. So the cry for cheap grace is actually cheapening grace by not saying it's God's not, his actions alone is not enough to save you. You have to do something too. It ends up being salvation by works as well. And I think a lot of us Christians functionally live by works, even though we know we're saved by grace.
Yeah.
That whole analogy is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I was driving to church on Sunday, I was just considering all the balancing that we have to do, trying to find the maybe even non-existent middle point, to say, okay, you need to recognize that you are not going to add anything to this that's going to make your grace complete, because it already is, or better than complete.
Right.
And also that a natural outpouring of your appreciation for your salvation is to engage with the world, with other people, in a way that makes it better.
Yeah.
And if it, for some reason, it means that you're sinning less, great.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing, is how do you put those two things together? Because you do need to put them together. And so what Paul here is kind of, with all of that said, here is the point I'm trying to make, is if you look at what Paul does, like in Romans or here, is once he's pushed that by faith, by grace alone, he then switches out of the latter kind of a framework to a creation framework, a death life, going from death to life, to God recreating you, which is actually, it's what you're seeing in like Ezekiel 36. We were dead in Christ, but God's made us alive together with him. And this is what he's talking about when he's saying that you are a new creation in Christ. And so my argument in a nutshell was to say, think in terms of God is molding me. He's changing my heart. He's molding my will. He's molding me. And I get to either cooperate with that or I don't. But that's more of the case. He's making me an entirely new person, rather than I'm trying to climb up to be with him. He's bringing his glory to me.
Actually, that's really helpful in many ways, because what your role is to be malleable.
Yeah, exactly.
And by doing so, if by listening and responding, whatever, God will be accomplishing what he wants with us as that instrument, and not with us actually getting it done. The shovel doesn't dig a hole. Right?
No, exactly. Which is why he ends up in verse 10 saying, we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus. So it's his works, his good works, but he does them through us. He's molding, he's changing me. And so I'm not adding anything to it. I'm being allowed to be transformed by God. And it's just because the place I want us to get is to not trust whether or not I'm growing in Christ's likeness, but instead trusting in his mercy and his ability to do what he needs to do, rather than my own actions. Trust his love. Trust his grace, and really be careful about trusting our responses and our actions. That's really dangerous. That ends up
It's so difficult, because when I heard you say we are allowing him to do this. It's like it always kind of comes back to inadvertently us thinking that we have some power there, right? It's like, oh, you're going to allow God to do that. Well, no, that's not what I mean. I mean, I'm I'm not going to resist it. It's tough because it's not like our role is to be obedient
Yeah,
and not to get credit for obedience.
right. Because it's this other the other way of thinking is so deeply ingrained in humanity.
Yeah,
It might even be the actual problem of the whole thing. Yeah,
stubbornness. Yeah,
this stubborn, I do it without you, God. I don't need you, God. I can determine what's right and wrong on my own. I can decide whether I should eat that tree or not. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what we talked about. It's subtle shifts, but very important shifts in our thinking. So
and this kind of comes back a little to what I think what I was trying to say, which is we have to continually check our own thinking
mhm.
to go, and I know I have to do this to go. Did I mean, I want to take pride, healthy pride, in accomplishing things. Um, it's, but I need to check and see what's my, have I acknowledged the blessing that God, this blessing that has allowed this to occur. Um,
And this just came to me. I wonder if, and we use that phrase, and I get it, pride in doing the right thing. But I'm wondering if the right word is actually joy. A
I guess,
sense of,
yeah,
yay, you know, because pride is, I feel I'm better than that. But it's like, no, it's just like, yay, this is just taking or pleasure,
yeah. I
joy, or,
It's like the idea that we've got how many different words for love, right? That
mhm.
I think sometimes, like, I'm proud of Vanessa or I'm proud of Sam. Um, and I think you're right that I'm taking joy in their accomplishments, their performances, who they are innately. Because I do struggle with that
Mhm.
word going, well, I know, oh gosh, I don't want pride to be unhealthy, but this is what I feel. And I also know that, as we reflect on relationships with our parents and stuff a lot, we were, um, we wanted them to be proud of who we are and what we accomplished. But I think you're right that I think if we said that, because I can tell you that, and you know this very well, when we see our kids succeed, the thing that brings tears to our eyes is overwhelming joy at their success.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, overwhelming joy. Just like, yes, this is so great. It's so wonderful to see him win or accomplish what he wanted to accomplish. It's just like there's almost nothing in life like that to see that. And so there's a of course God has to feel the same way when we do the right thing. And I think that's the thing is there's one of the quotes that kind of fits this whole thing is good people don't good people don't become good people because they do good things. Good people do good things. It's I don't know if I'm getting it quite right.
Sure.
If you want, yeah, if a good mother will take care of their child, not to become a good mother. They do that because they are. Which comes first, the being or the action? The being comes first, I think.
I think it's both. Um,
Yeah, they go together, don't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
because, I mean, recognizing human nature, we have to, and you were talking about this the other day, the neural pathways that you have
Oh,
to
true.
develop, right? That
Yeah.
sometimes we need to be active in working to change the way we think.
Hmm.
I Years ago, I had this habit of reflexively white lying about dumb things, you know. And I had to learn how to capture that. Like, oh, I was just getting ready to do that, and then to stop and go, why, you know. So what can I do differently? How can you
Right.
know? How can I respond to this differently? And that resulted in, you know, physiologically new neural pathways. But the intention is to be changed, to be better. So I think
You're
what we
right.
want
Yeah.
is, I think we can recognize both that, but when you're changed, if you're a good father, then you respond to things in a specific way. And if you're not good, but you want to be good, then
You just got to
it,
make some choices.
yeah. And
Yeah,
then
it's
again,
true.
you go back to, wait, am I empowered to change, or is God changing me? Oh man.
And that's what I wanted to end with. I mean, and this is why you kind of need to hold on to both to a degree. On one hand, in terms of your relationship with God, you need to see I think that the new creation, the being made, going from dead to being alive in recreation. You need to see that, but but on a human level, the empowerment piece I think is important, and that we are meant to be actively choosing, um, and we are meant to be thoughtful and going and this is why Paul will, this is where the commands come in, where we need to be transformed in our thinking. We need to put on Christ. We need to, rejoice in the Lord always. And there are commands. We do need to think about that and push that direction, but let the creation piece empower that, not just in terms of, that's real power, but also just give you comfort, because I don't need to worry about whether or not I'm okay with God.
Yeah.
Because you can't think about other people when you're worried about yourself. You just can't.
Yeah. Or
So
you're going to be really ineffective at it.
certainly, yeah.
Yeah,
So
which I think we have demonstrated so many times. Oh my gosh. Any
all right.
previews for Easter,
Any good news?
or previews for Easter?
Previews. We're going to be looking at some of the implications of the gospel in terms of how that levels the playing field for all humanity.
Yeah, it seems like a natural extension of what we've been talking about then.
Yeah, it does.
Like you planned it that way.
Yeah. So privilege doesn't help. Inequality doesn't help. So anyways, that's a little bit for Sunday.
Excellent. So I want to remind folks that if you are watching this or listening to this prior to Good Friday, that at 7 p.m. there will be a Good Friday service. And we want to invite you to that. And obviously, we've got Easter on Sunday. Love to see you there. Love for you to invite some folks. It's a great opportunity to introduce people to Christ in our congregation.
So thanks, sir. Thanks for joining us tonight. I pray you guys have a great night. See you hopefully on Sunday.
Take care, folks.